Arcade players, get ready. The new Atari 5200 Super System is here. With a controller so advanced it plays arcade. Graphics so real it looks arcade. With arcade hits you can't play on any other system. No other home video system can touch it. The new Atari 5200 Super System. It's as good as you are, maybe even better.
Next time.
Hello and welcome to another bounce on the retro gaming trampoline with Replay Retro. I'm Matt, and on today's show we pose the question, how do you follow one of the most pivotal hardware releases of all time, as we look into the story of the forgotten Atari 5200. In 1978, despite having only been on the market for a year, Atari founder and head at the time, Nolan Bushnell, believed the Atari video computer system would need replacing within the next year or two to prevent it being surpassed by competitors' products. Bushnell had Jay Miner lead a team to design just such a system using new sound and graphics chips they were already designing. However, Atari wasn't his anymore, and new owners, Warner Communications, had their own vision for stability, not wanting to throw money away replacing a product that they saw was selling well already, especially as the company recently had seen a significant drop in profits. Warner brought in Ray Kassar as a consultant to help steer Atari back onto the right path, and immediately Kassar and Bushnell were at war with each other over what the business should be doing next. This eventually led to Bushnell's forced retirement and control of Atari being handed to Kassar. He believed that increasing the marketing of the VCS and licensing smash hit games like Space Invaders would turn things around, and as it happened, he was right, with the company being back on form by 1980. Kassar also had ideas about the future of the computer industry, where currently machines like Tandy's TRS-80 had far greater profit margins than video game consoles. And with this in mind, focus shifted from development of a new console to that of a new computer instead, leading to the creation of the highly successful Atari 400 and 800 systems. However, like a ghost of the past, Bushnell's predictions would return to haunt Kassar as Mattel launched their Intellivision console in 1980, immediately kicking off a brutal marketing assault on the VCS, with adverts directly comparing the two, showing the superiority of Mattel's system. The truth was that games looked and played better on Intellivision thanks to the advanced controller and more powerful hardware. Just as Bushnell said it would, the VCS had been surpassed. Immediately work started on a successor known as System X. However, interdepartmental bickering led to this being scrapped, and ironically the existing computer hardware originally designed to be the next console would now be used to fill this role once again. Codenamed Pam, either because of a female member of staff or because it was slated to be a personal arcade machine, depending on who you ask, the system's technical specifications would naturally be based around the 8-bit computers which spawned it. It featured a 1.79 MHz MOS 6502C processor, along with 16 kilobytes of RAM, 2 kilobytes of ROM for the system BIOS, a 4-channel Pokey sound chip, and a selection of custom chips, including the graphic television adapter interface and alphanumeric television interface controller chips from the 8-bit computers. It was capable of a maximum resolution of 320 by 200 pixels and could display 256 colours on screen at the same time, with a maximum of 16 colours per line and 8 active sprites at a time. Despite being almost identical internally to its home computer brothers, software was not directly compatible due to a number of slight differences between the purposes of certain registers and their memory locations, as well as the reduced operating system of the console. Though rumours seem to suggest that this incompatibility was actually due to the continued rivalry between the home computer and console divisions of Atari. Prototypes suggest that Atari planned to use the System X name, along with the not at all long-winded subtitle of Advanced Video Computer System. However, when it was released in November of 1982 for around $300, the system would finally be named the Atari 5200, with the VCS being renamed 2600 to bring it in line. The 5200 would include 4 controller ports compared to the usual 2, expanding the multiplayer experience and offering an instant advantage over its competitors, though sadly only 2 released games took advantage of this feature. It would also be the first console to offer an automatic RF switch box, allowing the owner to switch from TV to games and back again just by turning the console on and off, something we take for granted now, which was probably pretty cool back then. In 1983, a revised version of the console would cut costs by doing away with 2 of the controller ports and also scrapping the automatic switch box in favour of a slightly more conventional design. These 2-part models are also slightly different internally to allow compatibility with the 2600 adapter released later that year, though original 4-port models can be modified to accept the adapter, and Atari carried this work out for free to anyone who needed it. Final 4-port releases, which already have this work done, can be identified by the asterisks in their serial numbers. The controllers themselves were extremely advanced compared to both 2600 and Intellivision, featuring an analog joystick allowing for a wider range of far more accurate control. Numerical keypads with game-specific overlays, as used by other systems of the era, were also included, as were 2 fire buttons on each side to suit both left and right-handed players, along with start, reset, and most importantly, a pause button, again the first time this simple feature had been offered. It's pretty clear that the Atari 5200 was a very advanced system, packing some powerful hardware and some truly innovative features that would go on to become industry standards. So why is it that today the machine is all but forgotten? Well, before we get to that, let's take a look at the hardware itself and just a few of the games. So the first thing you'll notice about the Atari 5200 is just how big it is. I mean, I'm really struggling to fit this on camera easily. The camera is already further back than it would normally be. It's huge. This thing is really huge. I have a standard DVD case here. It's the PS2 game Twisted Metal Black. Everyone knows how big a DVD case is, and you can see, I can flip that over 3 times and it'll nearly go 1 up as well, so it's nearly the size of 6 DVD cases. It is a huge piece of kit. We talk about the original Xbox being big and maybe even the Neo Geo AES being big, but this thing dwarfs them both. The only machines I can think of that are probably bigger than this would be certain versions of the Philips CDI, which were designed to fit into home stereo stackers, and perhaps the Commodore CD TV as well. They may just be a little bit bigger. Maybe the PSX, although no, it'd probably be a little bit narrower. This thing is an absolute beast, but it's a good-looking beast. This nice, slick, black, very symmetrical, apart from the logos and the power button over here. Nice, simple black design with some venting over here, which is mirrored on the other side, even though I don't think it's needed for venting on that side. It's more for design aesthetic. Another bit of venting here, which again is more aesthetic than anything else. This nice brushed metal panel, which kind of feels like it's an upgrade from the 2600's wooden panel. Maybe feels like this is supposed to be an evolution of that. Maybe they thought that next up they would have, I don't know, a carbon fibre or a diamond panel. But they didn't, so they didn't. You can also see on the front here that there are 4 controller ports, so this is indeed the 4-port version of the 5200, which is my personal favourite version just because it includes all of the functionality. The original 5200, it shows you what it really was. If you look at the cartridge port there, you can see that there is no metal contacts there inside, and instead you have basically that plastic thing acts as like a security key to unlock the cartridge so that the cartridge can then be pushed down. We'll have a look at that when we look at a cartridge in a moment. On the metal panel you have the nice Atari 5200 logo there. And of course on the other side the power button. Those are the only 2 things that break up the symmetry of the machine. At the back here, you have a panel which lifts up to reveal your control pads, which are nicely tucked away. Again, making this a nice, neat, professional-looking device that could easily be part of your home entertainment system and doesn't look like a toy, unlike the ColecoVision and the Intellivision, which do look a little bit toyish because the controllers are out everywhere, there's buttons, logos in your face. This kind of looks like a posh set-top box, I think, more than anything else. It's a really nice looking piece of kit, very professional indeed. On the sides, again, stays simple, a nice wedge shape, just black. And the other side, around the back here, you can see there is a selection switch here, which I would assume was for choosing between channels 3 and 4 for America. That seems to be a general thing that a lot of consoles in America have. Over on this side, cover for the expansion port. Nothing was ever released to go with the expansion port. Curious about what Atari had planned to go in there, as I know the 2600 expansion for it goes into the cartridge port, so wonder what was going to go in there. Maybe a RAM upgrade? Who really knows? Well, someone will. You can see the serial number sticker there. So Atari Inc., showing the model number 5200, and the serial number for this console, which you'll note does not have an asterisk, and so this one has not been modified to use the 2600 adapter, though I have performed the modification myself, so yes, it has. Hidden away here, again hidden away nicely so that it's all neat, all contained, all very nice, is a single cable. And there's a lot of it, allowing you to position the machine wherever you would like in your home. And this cable carries both the power into the console and also the video signal out of the console. We'll take a closer look at that in a few moments. But you can see you do get a significant amount of cable there, which would be great to allow you to either play on the floor, as many people did, or to allow you to put this somewhere on your shelving unit near your TV. However you want to position it, the 5200 will work, and you can tidy up the rest of the cable in that little cable tidy there. So we'll take a look at one of the controllers here. The fabled Atari 5200 controllers, and you can see you have the start, pause and reset buttons. Pause being, as far as I'm aware, the first time we had a working pause button on a controller. The analog stick, which is a really nice smooth movement. You can see the rubber boot on this one is actually damaged there, it's actually broken off, but it is a really nice smooth movement. It's just a pity it doesn't self-center. But at the end of the day, it was, you know, one of the first analog controllers. Atari probably just didn't think about that. And obviously, as I've already mentioned, they were planning on doing something about it. They just didn't think about it at the time. You have your full keypad here, which is something that we also see on the Intellivision and the ColecoVision and a number of other systems for providing controls to a number of games. Again, this is the early days of controller design. No one had really thought a lot about ergonomics, so this was just something people were used to, a phone keypad. It would work in a pinch. Fire buttons on the left and right side, meaning that you can play this left and right-handed very, very easily without any problems. And a 15-pin connector to the console. Taking a look at a game cartridge. This is Pac-Man. They are slightly wider than the 2600 cartridges. And you can see there that the overlay is included. Not a lot on this overlay really, just enabling you to say whether you want 1 or 2 player and what game level you want. And they simply pop into the controller with a little bit of faffing. There you go, just like that. Not that you'd really need it for Pac-Man, but, you know, you can see how for certain games it could be very useful to have that functionality. Looking at the underneath of the cartridge, again, you see no exposed contacts. And if I press down here, it doesn't open up to expose them. It keeps the cartridge very nicely protected. And when you install it into the console, the 2 pins in the console unlock the cartridge, press the flap down, and allow the game to work. And that simply slots in very nicely like that. Taking a look then at that fabled and legendary RF switch box that everyone loves to mock. It's a lot simpler than people seem to make out to use. You simply connect this bit to the TV, like it says, TV, or if your TV did not have the correct port, then you could happily use either of these two extra fittings around the side. For those of us old enough to remember when TVs didn't all necessarily have standard fittings. The switch here allows you to put it into standby or normal so that you can tell it to stop bypassing if you want, if you're having any problems, but normal will allow the game to bypass the TV when turned on. You take the wire from the console and you plug that into the game socket there, like it says, game. And you'll notice there wasn't a big flash of sparks then, like you seem to get when a lot of people review this. And the reason for that is because I haven't connected the power. Because, guys, if you didn't know this already, connect your power leads to the machine before you connect them to the wall socket. That's just basics. You shouldn't need to be told that. But people love to mock the 5200 and take the piss out of this, quite frankly, genius setup. And so making that big flash of sparks so that they can go, oh my god, it's a fire hazard, everyone's gonna die, is dramatic, and apparently that's what people want to see. But the fact is, set it up properly, you're not gonna get the flash of sparks. Simple. You then take the power lead, as you would expect, connect that to the power socket, as it says, and of course, you have your big transformer and a plug to go into the wall, or in this country, obviously a plug to go into an adapter to then go into the wall. But it's simple, nice and easy. Everything is labelled up correctly, and great of Atari that the transformer is a separate box and not the plug, so you can fit these into standard sockets without any problems, unlike, for example, the Mega Drive, which you couldn't because they were really big, chunky plugs. Points to Atari. So of course, once you're set up, you simply hit the power button and you're ready to play Pac-Man on your Atari 5200.
Now the first thing you should be noticing with the 5200 version of Pac-Man is just how much better it is than that awful 2600 version of Pac-Man. I mean, that thing was abysmal. It was barely playable. Whereas this is a much better game. It really is a lot better. If every now and again, by the way, Pac-Man's mouth appears to stop moving in this video, it's just because my capture card is struggling with the 5200's frame rate a little. So in actual fact, he is moving just as you would expect him to. Oh my god! Just as you would expect him to. But it's just, as I say, that the frame rate of the console is slipping a little, and the capture card is just struggling to get it right. So sometimes his mouth is moving, and sometimes it's not. That'll probably happen with the rest of the games as well. That was always going to end in disaster. One thing I will say is that the controller, that analog and lack of centering on it does make this quite difficult, because obviously Pac-Man needs quite definite movements. You know, you have left, right, up and down, and that's it. You'll notice that on some, like there, I'm struggling to go down because I'm just struggling to get the controller right. Can I clear this map? On a video, clearing the map. No! Oh, see, again, that I couldn't turn right because I couldn't get the stick in the right position, whereas had this been a more conventional, say 2600 stick, I'm sure I wouldn't have had any problem there. But I would have been playing the terrible version of Pac-Man, so you know, swings and roundabouts. But I mean, this is a much more arcade, not perfect necessarily, but arcade close. See, again, you can see I'm struggling on some of these. There you go, I missed that corner. It's difficult to oh, that was silly. It's difficult to explain how hard the control can be. And it is something you do get better at the more you get used to, but it's just a lot less definitive. If the controller centered itself, I'm sure it would be better. But the fact is, the controller doesn't center itself, and so it is very difficult. So the next game we're going to look at is Vanguard, and the reason I'm not getting straight into the game is I am really going to struggle to play this, because as you can see, it looks really good, and you'll soon be able to hear that it sounds really good. But this is one of those games that is really let down by the controller, because without that centering, you are constantly flying either up, down, left, right, and it's very difficult to get it so that your ship is flying on an even level. You'll see it in a moment, you'll see this. Let's go. So there, I'm actually trying to center it now and stop. There you go, I've got it centered. So I have to keep firing. But obviously, those of you who know Vanguard know that if I want to fire up or down, I have to fly the ship up or down. Which means I have to keep moving up or down. But as I say, without the centering, it is just so difficult to control the ship. And it's frustrating because this controller is really good. I know they break very easily, but the level of control that Atari was trying to give you here it's really difficult to play and talk. Ugh. The level of control Atari was trying to give you with this stick was ridiculously impressive. This is way more than digital would ever have given. But without that centering, it's just nightmarish because you just struggle so much. I mean, it's difficult for you guys watching to see how complicated the relationship with the controller is, because it is a great controller, it's just so hard to use. And I think the centering would have made it a lot better. And I certainly don't want to rag on the... Oh, come on. I certainly don't want to rag on the controller too much and say that it's terrible, because it's a good idea. Just poorly implemented. Way more advanced than the Coleco or Intellivision controllers were. Way more advanced than the 7800 controller would be, or than the NES controller would be. Just poorly implemented, so it just doesn't work very well. You really do need to try one of these controllers yourself to really understand the struggle, I think. Now, Galaxian, on the other hand, is a game that manages to make quite good use of the controller. Obviously, the game itself is hardly a showcase for a brand new piece of hardware. I mean, it's Galaxian, you know, it's a fairly simple game. Though a good game, but, you know, it's not Donkey Kong, is it, realistically? It was never going to compete with that. But what it does do is it adds something that the other consoles didn't really have. And that is this analog control. Because you can see I can move my ship quite slowly by moving the controller just a little bit, like you would with a modern analog controller. Or I can rapidly dodge left and right by pulling the controller a lot harder. And that does add something, because obviously previously with the 2600 and also with the Intellivision and ColecoVision, you had digital control. So you had left, right, up and down. Obviously diagonals for games that used that as well. But that was it. Whereas now you are adding the dynamic of being able to control the speed of your movement. And that's something we take for granted now, when obviously every console has twin analog sticks as standard. That's just what we expect. But back then, that was a revolutionary idea. That was completely new. And in fairness, that makes these controllers more advanced than even the 7800 would have, and later the NES. You know, the NES continued to use digital control. So yes, Atari didn't get it right. It didn't always work properly. properly, and these controllers do break easily. I can feel this one starting to fail. The fire buttons are failing as we speak. But are clean and it'll be back on its feet. But had they built these controllers better and had they added that self-centering, they would have been a real highlight to the console. Oh, that was just ridiculous. Apologies to anyone wearing headphones. Anyone who's struggling to understand what I mean by like that fluid analog control, if you've ever played Pong using a digital joystick but also using the paddle controllers, you will know the difference. With the paddle controller, you know, you can move up and down. You feel like you have very little control, whereas with the paddle controllers, you feel like you can control the speed of the movement, you can position the paddle exactly where you want it to be, and that is the difference between digital and analog. And that is the difference that this controller, when it's working, adds. Other than that though, obviously, you know, it's just a fairly standard Galaxians. Much better graphics than the 2600, and probably, you know, even compared to the Coleco and Intellivision. Not bad, really. But nothing special, nothing that you were going to write home about, and certainly nothing that you were going to go out and buy a 5200 for.
Just as Nolan Bushnell had predicted, challenges were coming after Atari's market dominance. Ray Kassar had reacted too slowly to prevent the damage done by the Intellivision, and to make matters worse, Coleco had also beaten Atari to the launch of their hardware by 3 months with the ColecoVision, an impressive system also advertising top quality arcade ports, but retailing for $100 less than the Atari or Mattel machines, which came bundled with arguably the best version of the must-have killer app Donkey Kong, while the 5200, lacking any real killer app of its own, was bundled with Super Breakout, a game that did nothing to show off the potential of Atari's new machine. Adding insult to injury, Coleco would go on to release lesser versions of Donkey Kong for the 2600 and Intellivision, making substantial profits from their competitors' machines, while also denying the 5200 the chance to compete with its own version. Worse still, Atari had been cost-cutting. The advanced controllers, which should have held the system above its rivals, were poorly made using cheap flexible circuitry which failed easily, and the analog joystick lacked the springs needed for self-centering, making it difficult to use for games like Pac-Man, and allowing the complicated mechanism to get damaged easily. A redesign to solve these issues was planned, but soon abandoned along with the 5200 Junior, with further board revisions and a smaller case to bring costs down. Unlike its rivals, the 5200 never even made it out of America, and Atari instead turned their attention back to the 2600, not releasing a new console platform until the XEGS and 7800 systems arrived in 1987, though the 2600 would continue to sell right into the early 90s. Despite introducing some great features and bringing home fantastic arcade ports including Gyrus and one of my personal arcade favourites, Berserk, as well as epic originals such as Rescue on Fractalus, which demonstrated the awesome potential of the machine, the 5200 simply failed to gain traction in the market. Whether or not it would have done better had Nolan got his way and the machine had beaten the Intellivision and ColecoVision to launch, we'll never know. However, we do know that the North American video game crash was just around the corner, and the industry was about to collapse, taking both rival machines down with it. By May of 1984, just 18 months after launching, and with around 1 million units sold, the 5200 was dead. Atari had been dethroned, and the industry was changed forever. Today, as with so many underdog consoles, there is an active homebrew community for Atari's forgotten machine, supplementing the official library of around 70 games. The availability of a flash cart for the system boosts this and makes it an interesting curiosity. However, it's worth noting that as there was no PAL release, you'll need to modify the console to use it in these regions, and importing one can be expensive due to their relative scarcity and large size. Chances are you'll also need to refurbish the controllers using upgraded parts available online, as unfortunately this isn't one of those times when everyone's exaggerating about how easily they stop working, though often a good clean will provide a temporary fix. That's all we've got time for on today's show, but don't forget you can follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, or even support the show on Patreon. And of course, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.